Could there be a link between the firearm found on accused number 3 and the Senzo Meyiwa murder? That's the evidence that the court will be hearing when the trial resumes today. A ballistics expert, Criminologist, who investigated the scene, is now due to give testimony in court. But before we take you, of course, to those proceedings, let's find out more from our reporter, Manqoba Mchunu, eNCA reporter, joining me just outside court. And good morning to you. Colleague, yesterday we definitely saw some evidence being presented inside court, but the question still begs to be answered. Could we see that link and find it between that firearm and accused number 3? Good morning.
Well, a very good morning to you, Dumelo. In fact, we are expecting that very question to be answered here in court this morning, as Criminologist, of course, who is a ballistic expert. We're not hearing his name for the first time. We also recall this was the ballistic expert that was involved in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial. He gave evidence before this court about the work that he had done as far as that investigation is concerned. But before I take you to what we're expecting from Criminologist, of course, yesterday we heard crucial and chilling evidence from a doctor that conducted a postmortem on Senzo Meyiwa on just 2 days after he had been killed, giving us details as to how exactly Senzo Meyiwa had died and the injuries that he had suffered that led to his death. And what we heard from Dr. Johannes Steenekamp is that Senzo Meyiwa would have likely have pushed that firearm when that shot was fired. We understand now that that gun had been pressed against his chest when that gunshot was then fired by one of the alleged intruders that was inside the house. And what Steenkamp says is that it had moved in a downward trajectory. That means that he had passed the midline of the body, and it had pierced some of the crucial organs. His lung, his right lung, we understand, as well as his heart were pierced by this bullet. And we also understand that he had suffered a severe bleeding, internal bleeding, according to the evidence of Dr. Steenekamp. And he says this is probably the reason why there was not much blood that was on the scene when Senzo Meyiwa had then died. You recall that from the evidence we've heard in court, it seems to suggest that there were just droplets of blood, and even when Meyiwa was being carried to the car, not much blood was seen on that particular scene. And perhaps this then explains that due to the internal bleeding that he had suffered, that's the reason probably why Senzo Meyiwa had not bled so much on that day. But we also got to understand just how long Meyiwa would have survived after that shot had been fired. And according to Steenekamp, he says it would have not taken seconds or minutes for Senzo Meyiwa to be alive after that shot was fired. But perhaps let's take a listen to what he had to say as far as this is concerned.
How long the deceased would have survived after the infliction of the wound?
Well, the heart and the lungs are important organs, and injury, especially this type of injury to those organs, can cause a fatality. Sometimes it's instantaneously. In this case, I do not think so, because of the mechanism of death, which I explained as possibly the blood loss. And I think in this case, and he's quite a fit young man, he probably would have survived seconds, minutes, definitely not hours.
And while certainly we're expecting more crucial evidence from this court from ballistic expert Criminologist, of course, he's expected to give evidence as far as what he found when he arrived on the scene. Already we know that there was a bullet projectile that was discovered on the scene a day after Senzo Meyiwa had been killed. And we heard also last week some of the evidence seemingly suggesting that that very same firearm was meant to have been destroyed, but it was taken 3 years later in 2020, and that's when the investigators as well as Criminologist had then taken it to analyze it for this particular case. And so we're going to hear more answers as to how there could possibly be a link between this firearm or a bullet projectile that was found on the scene with one of the accused or the accused that are before this particular court. But to unpack more of what we expect today, I'm joined now now by a criminologist from the Tshwane University of Technology, Professor Kholofelo Rakubu. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time this morning. Perhaps let's just start with the importance of this evidence, the forensic pathology evidence that we heard yesterday, and how crucial this is for this particular case and in a criminal case.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. All these experts play a critical part in administering justice because of their role in the criminal investigation. Remember, all the evidence presented today should lead to successful prosecution as they determine, amongst many other, where the manner in which death occurred and location of the shooter. For example, today from the ballistic expert, we're supposed to know and understand location, which should correspond with what? The internal wounds that, according to the forensic pathologist, Senzo suffered from. And again, all should be aligned so that we understand and also understand the findings, because we are safeguarding against what? We are safeguarding against cognitive biasness, because if you look into the nature of this case, it dragged so much that there could be cognitive biasness, because we should also understand that biasness plugs many forensic domains, and in this case is bound to be so. And what are the sources that lead to biasness? Biasness is not intentionally discriminatory. Biases. They can emerge from multiple sources. So looking into this case and the evidence, what could lead to biasness, cognitive biasness? It can be the nature of the crime, because if we look into this, it has multiple contextual domains that might influence or impact findings, right? Both from the forensic side and from the ballistic side. So as evidence is provided, we also want to assess that. What also could be source of biasness is the initial investigation, a specific person that was dealing with the case initially or collected evidence from the crime scene. That could also lead to biasness in the findings and conclusion, and human nature as well. As an investigator sometimes, or as an expert, you are bound to miss certain stages that might lead to a different conclusion. Hence, we're now talking of cognitive biasness. So as they are presenting evidence and looking into the magnitude of this case and how issues of context, where now there's a mention of an eyewitness, and next thing there's no eyewitness, we have seen this, we have not seen that. So that also lead to what might even direct certain conclusions and findings.
And on that issue of biasness, Professor, of course, we've heard evidence coming from this court as far as the crime scene itself was handled. There was not much, that police did to secure the crime scene. And some of the evidence and arguments we're hearing from the defense is that that crime scene was likely to have been contaminated, and also that there was possibly planting of some of the evidence in that crime scene. How crucial will this be, and what perhaps are the arguments that we can expect from the defense in trying to discredit some of the evidence that we've heard as far as this case is concerned?
Looking into the fact that there has been crime scene contamination, that in itself tells of a different picture. That is defeating, that will be defeating the ends of justice, because knowledge that there has been crime scene contamination already, there would be questions around conclusions and findings. Whatever conclusion will be reached will be questioned, because it's clear from the evidence that has been shared over the years, it's clear that there has been contamination. So that, as we're waiting for ballistic experts, determination of the location of the shooter, how do you do so? How do we believe such when there has been evidence that the crime scene was already contaminated? And then the damage to the bullet and the clues to where the shooter was exactly located, because that should correspond with the wounds. So we're looking into that. However, hope is lost, because there are certain steps and stages, critical critical information that was not secured. And we're looking into that, and that would have assisted this case long time ago. So again, let's just hear if there will be correspondence from the ballistic expert with regard to what the pathologist has already mentioned. But again, it paints a very dimmed picture, gloom picture. We're just hoping and trusting in our justice system that maybe they will salvage, but the contextual part, the contextual information that correlates to organizational culture, information that led to crime scene contamination, leaves much to be desired in this case.
And just finally, Prof, in terms of the evidence that we're expecting, we know that it's crucial evidence from the ballistic expert. He's going to link perhaps one of the accused or the accused to this particular shooting. What is it that will be crucial coming out from this testimony?
What will be crucial? Remember, there's questions around whether there was an intruder or not. Now, determining the location of the shooter, location of the entry wounds, size and penetration of the wounds, and damage to the bullets, all that information, and where an intruder got the comfort to shoot, or the location in particular, because already there's mention of scuffles, fights, there's conspiracy theories around what really transpired. So the ballistic report should make sense in its true sense. It should make sense, and it should talk to the wounds, like I said. However, we might not get there. Like I said, the contextual influences, such as an eyewitness or suspect identification, that might impede the purpose of the day. But again, let's hear what he has to say. That will assist prosecution. But as far as what we already know as the country, I don't think we're going to get anything different. But let's hope, unless what he's going to represent today will now take us to a different direction that we're hoping for. And that direction should make sense with regard to what really transpired on the day, because so as to settle the dust and to just finalize this. It has been dragging far too long, and it's losing direction at some point, and it continues to lose focus because we get to hear information that does not make sense at some point. So we've got capabilities. Our expert knows what they do, but I still take them to what? Contamination. And with that contamination, there might not be a successful prosecution in this case.
Well, thank you very much, Prof, from your time. Well, certainly we're expecting those court proceedings to resume at 10 o'clock this morning with the evidence from ballistic expert Chris Mangena expected. Of course, he's also going to face tough questions about that particular issue, the contamination of the crime scene. Already you've heard an indication from a statement that it deposed that an evidence bag that contained one of the firearms had been opened at the time that we had received it. So we're certainly expecting him to face tough questions also from the defense. But the case expected to resume at 10 this morning.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, colleague Manqoba Mchunu, just outside court in Pretoria in Tshwane, where we expect, of course, the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial to continue. Speaking alongside criminologist Professor Kholofelo Rakubu, giving her perspective on how perhaps not only, the testimony will go with Chris Mangena, the ballistic expert, but also the entire process, the retrial, the restart of this trial. Perhaps will it produce a successful prosecution? That begs to be questioned.